Окей, ми майже вийшли на пряму трансляцію. Зараз ще, я думаю, секунд 30, і ми будемо розпочинати для всіх. Окей. І зараз ми ще вімкнемо запис тут. Тож, шановні українці, ми будемо розпочинати. Ми раді вас бачити на наступному вебінарі нашої серії вебінарів для українців. Даний вебінар буде стосуватися теми податків. Даний вебінар організований ініціативою United for Changes за підтримки Європейського Союзу, DLA Piper Ireland, Irish Refugee Council та Також Labs. Даний вебінар не обов'язково відображає позицію наших партнерів. Ми дуже раді вас бачити у цій серії вебінарів. Перед тим, як ми розпочнемо, будь ласка, напишіть нам в коментарях, чи нас добре видно, чутно, щоб ми рухались з вами далі. Так, чекаємо відписки, чи нас видно, чути. Так, нам пишуть, що все в порядку. Отож, ще раз раді вас вітати. Даний вебінар у нас буде відбуватися вперше у трохи такому незвичному міксованому форматі. Ми одразу з вами знаходимося і в Zoom, і на Ютубі, враховуючи те, які у нас сьогодні спікери, і у нас в зв'язку з цим буде потрібний додатковий переклад. Якщо ви слухаєте нас у Ютубі і вам потрібен переклад, то ми зараз залишимо посилання ще додатково на Zoom, щоб ви могли вибрати функцію перекладу. В той час, як будуть виступати наші спікери англійською мовою, у вас буде можливість побачити переклад. Якщо ви дивитесь нас в Zoom або з комп'ютера, або з телефона, внизу екрану вашого девайсу, ноутбуку чи телефону, ви можете бачити такий значок з планеткою і з надписом Interpretation. Це синхронний переклад, який допомагає нам робити наш чудовий перекладач. Тому, якщо ви хочете слухати переклад українською того, що буде казати один з наших спікерів, просто, будь ласка, виберіть там українську мову, Ukrainian. Так само там є функція, яка називається Mute Original Audio. Це означає, що ви не будете чути оригінальну англійську дорожку. Тому в будь-який момент, коли вам потрібен переклад, переключайте, кажіть нам. Якщо виникають якісь технічні складності, теж, будь ласка, пишіть у коментарях, чи вам все видно, чутно, і ми будемо раді вам допомогти виправити ці технічні складності. Протягом вебінару ми побудуємо нашу розмову наступним чином. Ми почнемо з виступу від експерта по податкам, потім ми подивимось бізнес-перспективу стосовно оподаткування в Ірландії, і в результаті цього ми ще в кінці відповімо на ваші додаткові запитання. Тож, без подальших зволікань я хотів би представити наших спікерів, які сьогодні погодились доєднатися до нас. Перш за все, з нами Сара Обойл, сіньор менеджер консалтингової компанії EY, спеціалізується у податках і поділиться з нами своїм досвідом. Також з нами сьогодні Руслан Мочарський, директор of the Art of Coffee, батько, бізнесмен, українець, який погодився з нами поділитися своєю історією і своїм досвідом оподаткування в Ірландії. Цей вебінар буду модерувати я, Богаченко Павло, один із ініціаторів United for Changes, а також Мар'яна О'Ніл, Ukrainian Response Lead в рамках Irish Refugee Council. Отож, без подальших зволікань я передаю слово до Сари, і Сара може розпочати свою презентацію. Sara, the floor is yours. You may proceed with your presentation.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. So I'll go through the agenda about what we're going to talk about, and then we'll kick off. So first of all, I'll just go through an introduction to Irish tax. So you've arrived into Ireland, what do you need to do? Talking about things like tax credit certificates for employees, and then also touching on like freelancer, self-employed and limited companies as well. I'll then go back to speaking about the PAYE for employees, and I'll give a high-level example with a couple of calculations. Then there's the impact of tax residence and domicile, and I'll explain what those terms mean. And then we'll have a look at an estimate of net pay versus your social welfare benefits and how you can kind of compare one against the other And then we'll look at a concessional treatment from revenue, which is tax treatment where you're remaining working for a Ukrainian employer. And finally, we'll look at if you are an employer yourself and what you need to do to register for taxes. And then we'll just have some questions at the end. Okay. Okay, so first of all, an introduction to Irish tax. So our tax year here in Ireland runs from, in the calendar year, 1 January to the 31st of December. And when you arrived into Ireland, you probably have already applied for your tax registration number, which is known as a PPS number. If you haven't done that, then you can log on to the Revenue website and it will give instructions on how to do that, and you apply for that online on social welfare. So that's the first step. The second step that you need to do is you need to register for taxes. So if you're an employee, you'll need to apply for what is known as a tax credit certificate. So when you get a new employer in Ireland, you give your tax registration number, your PPS number to your employer. You create a My account, and this can be set up using what you might already have, a MyGov ID. And then you register your Irish job on the Revenue's Jobs and Pensions Service. And it just says there that you need your employer's tax registration number, the start date of your new job, and the frequency of your salary. And it just shows you there. I've just put the steps on how you go through and make that application. And once you get through, it just asks for some personal details, and you just answer about 5 or 6 questions. And then that application goes off. It usually takes about 3 days for Revenue to process it, sometimes less, and then you'll get your tax credit certificate sent to you. The tax credit certificate, what that is it shows how you're going to be taxed through payroll as an employee. So it will set out the tax credits. Everybody is entitled to tax credits. So everyone gets a personal tax credit based on the circumstances, whether they're married or with a civil partner or single. It will also set out any reductions to your tax credits because you might be receiving some taxable social welfare benefits. So in order to collect the taxes on that, they might reduce down your tax credits. It will also set out the standard tax rate bands that apply. So for income tax, which is PAYE, and also for universal social charge, USC. Now, the importance of getting your PPS number and also then registering your Irish job is that if you don't do this, you won't get a tax credit certificate, and it will mean then that through payroll, your employer will need to operate what is known as the emergency basis of taxation. And when that happens, they don't get details of what bands and credits you're entitled to, so they have to operate it at the marginal, at the higher rates of tax. But there's a later slide, and I'll go through that in a bit more detail. There's also a link here, and if you click into that link, there is all the details that I had given, and it also gives the information in Ukrainian and Russian. Then if you're not an employee, you're freelancer, self-employed, it's taxed the same way. The way that you are taxed is you're taxed on your income less any allowable expenses. So you're arrived down at your profits. And those profits then are liable to income tax, the universal social charge, and then pay-related social insurance. The pay-related social insurance is PRSI, that is the social security in Ireland. And self-employed individuals pay Class S PRSI at 4%. Now, in order to register, if you are a freelancer or self-employed, you need to firstly register for a My account, and then you'll need to complete the tax registration process because you'll need to register for income tax. So this is a different process for if you're an employee. So if you're an employee, you apply for a tax credit certificate. If you're a freelancer or self-employed, you'll need to register for income tax. And once you've done that registration process, line on revenue, you can then register for the revenue online system, which is what you will need to liaise with revenue. And that's where you will file your annual tax returns and pay your taxes. And what you do is you get a digital certificate, which goes onto your computer, and it's so that you'll set up the taxes. There's another link here in relation to tax for self-employed people, just to give some more information. So if you are a freelancer or self-employed, as I said, you're taxed under the pay and file system. So that means that by the 31st of October, following the year end, so if we were talking about this year, 2022, by the 31st of October 2023, there's some things that you need to have done. So these are the deadlines. That's the deadline to pay your preliminary tax. So preliminary tax is basically an estimate of the taxes due for your current trading year. You don't need to pay preliminary tax for the first year that you're a self-assessed taxpayer, but you may wish to do so because then you'll have some taxes sitting in the account so that when you come to do your next year's tax return, you'll already have the taxes there to pay it, or you can just leave it and then pay it when it is due in the following year. Because then what you do then is you file your tax return for the previous year on the 31st of October, and it calculates the amount of taxes that you're due to pay. It deducts off any preliminary taxes you've already paid, and then you will need to pay any balance of tax due for that previous year. So there I just set out the deadlines. So for the 2021 tax year, so that's last year, the deadline will be this year, 31st of October 2022, to pay preliminary tax for the current year, 2022, to file your 2021 tax return, and to pay any balance of tax due for the 2021 tax year. Now, sometimes, usually every year, this deadline is extended to mid-November. So, like, for example, this year, they've extended the 2021 tax return deadline to the 16th of November 2022. So that's if you're a freelancer or self-employed. Then coming on to limited companies. So this is where you've set up as a separate legal entity. So it's separate from its owner. So if that's the case, then you may need to register as an employer because you may be paying salaries, or just to yourself and to others. So you'd need to register for PAYE, and you also may, depending on what you're doing, may need to register for VAT and corporation tax. So then coming back onto the PAYE system. So this is for employees. So it's the pay as you earn. And what happens is you get paid, you receive your pay slip, and you'll have your salary that's paid to you. And then each month in real time, the employer has to operate this PAYE system. And so they will deduct off of that gross salary and income that you receive your PAYE, which is income tax, your USC, and then the Social Security PRSI, and then you will receive the net amount into your bank account. So from the 1st of January 2019, employers are now obliged to report their payroll to revenue on or before the date that they pay their staff on a real-time basis. And it also gives you then access to your payroll information on a real-time basis. So you can see what your employer has paid for you and what they have reported to revenue as taxable. And you can get to that information through either your My account or your Ross account. So then I'll come back onto this emergency tax. With emergency tax, so where you don't have a tax credit certificate, they have to operate what is known as the emergency basis of tax. And what that means is that you will have to pay taxes at the higher marginal rates. So the marginal rate of income tax at the minute is 41%, 8% USC, and then you'll pay your PRSI at 4%. So that's if there's no PPS number and the tax credit certificate isn't available. Now, say you've arrived into Ireland and maybe for the first month or two, you're on emergency taxes, and then you get your tax credit certificate through. If your tax credit certificate is issued on what is known a cumulative basis, which means that they can operate the taxes and the bans and credits from the 1st of January to date, payroll will be able to refund those emergency taxes that you have paid to you through payroll. If, however, it's towards the end of the year, and maybe you get issued a week 1 tax credit certificate, and it will see it on it, then it will say on the tax credit certificate whether it is a week 1 or not, then they won't be able to refund it through the payroll. They'll only be able to apply the bans and credits from that point onwards. And then you'd need to file a tax return to get those emergency taxes back after the end of the tax year. So I've talked a lot about PAYE, Universal Social Charge and PRSI, and the tax credit certificate. So just to kind of go into a bit more depth in that. So PAYE, income tax, is made up of a standard rate of tax, which is currently 20%, and then a higher rate of tax, which is currently 40%. So what rate band applies to you? So here I have just included a screenshot of what the current 2022 tax rates and bands are, and it all depends on your personal circumstances. So, for example, if you're single or widowed or a surviving civil partner without qualifying children, then your first 36,800 euros of income is going to be taxed at 20% income tax, and anything else over and above that is going to be taxed at 40%. And then those amounts go up depending on whether you're married, 1 income, married 2 incomes, etc. Then in relation to the married income for married with 1 income, it goes up to 45,800 at 20%, and then the balance is at 40%. Then coming on to the Universal Social Charge, or USC, as it may be shown on your payslip. So this is another tax. It's payable on your total income. Some people get it confused with Social Security because it's got the word social in it, but it is actually just, it's another tax on your total income. So provided your total income exceeds 13,000 euros for the year, then USC will be due. And I just set out there the standard rates and thresholds for 2022. So the first 12,012 is subject to USC at 0.5%, then the next 9,283 at 2%, the next 48,749 at 4.5%, and that brings you up to 70,044. So if your income is over 70,044 in the year, then the balance will be taxable at 8%. There are reduced rates of universal social charge, but that just applies to individuals who are 70 or over and whose total income is 60,000 or less, or if you hold a full medical card. And so the reduced rates are 0.5% on the first 12,012 and 2% on the balance. And that's what is in place currently. There was talks of getting rid of that, but we'll have to see what happens. And then finally, PRSI, as I said, this is the pay-related social insurance, Social Security, and all employees pay this up to pensionable age, and it's 4% employee PRSI. There is an employer PRSI charge, but that's for the employer to pay. So those are the 3 deductions that you'll see from your payslip. Then coming on, so you've started off with your income. You've got your standard rate bands and your USD bands. So you calculate how much income tax you have to pay, PAYE, and how much USD you'll have to pay. Once you've calculated the amount of income tax you have to pay, this income tax then is reduced by your tax credits, which are shown on your tax credit certificate. And there's lots of different ones depending on your circumstances. Everybody will receive a personal tax credit. So you'll either get one. There's one for a single individual, is currently 1,700 per year. And then if you're married or in a civil partnership, there's one for 3,400, and there's different versions here as well, depending on your circumstances. Now, when you first apply for your tax credit certificate, it will issue you out with a standard tax credit certificate, which may just have the single bands and credits available on. And it will give you maybe a personal tax credit and a PAYE tax credit. So everyone gets a PAYE tax credit if your income, if you're an employee and your income is being taxed through the pay-as-you-earn system. But any other tax credits that you think would apply to you, and there's a full list of them in this link, you would then need to make an application to Revenue, which you can do via your My Account, to get other tax credits coded onto your tax credit certificate. When that tax credit certificate is updated in the next month, when your employer goes to do the payroll, they will get details of that and they will apply those tax credit deductions in through your payroll. So this is just an example of a payslip. So as you can see here on the left-hand side is all the income and the benefits. And then on the right-hand side is everything else that's being deducted from that income. So you'll see the PAYE, the PRSI, and the USC. Then you might see other deductions, for example, with regards to if you join an employee pension scheme, your employee pension, you can get tax relief on your employee pension contributions. So that's just PAYE income tax relief. There's no relief for USC or PRSI, but that is a good way to get tax relief, is to join your employee pension scheme. So AVC is also pensions, additional voluntary contributions, and then there might be certain after-tax contributions that you're making, so they might be shown there as well. Somewhere on your payslip, it might not look exactly like this, but they should also set out your cumulative details. So that's the details of how much pay year to date you've received and how much taxes have been paid, etc. So I just wanted to give a very high level example of what a tax calculation would look like. So I've set one out here for if you're a single or widowed individual with the bands and credits for that. And I've set one out then if you were married with one income earner. So I've given the same gross income. So you start up with your gross income here. I've deducted off some pension contributions. And this then you arrive down at the income then that is liable to PAYE, which is income tax. So then you apply that at the relevant band. So there's a different bands here. The reason why this is 38,000 is it's under the band for a married one income earner, which is 45,000 something. So it's all taxable at 20%. Whereas here, if you're a single individual, you have up to 36,800 taxable at 20%, and then the balance is at 40%. Then you deduct off your tax credits. So these are the tax credits for a single individual with the PAYE credit here. And this is the tax credits for a married individual, the PAYE. So you've got different deductions here. So this is the amount of the PAYE due. Then you go down to calculate your universal social charge. So this just runs through the bands that I was talking about. And that calculates how much USC is due. And then finally, the PRSI is the employee PRSI rate at 4% on the total gross income. So then those would be the deductions that are taken from you in your pay slip, and this would be the net that you would receive. So that's just a very rough guide to how you calculate your taxes. So as you've obviously come from Ukraine, sometimes if you've arrived in during the year or you leave during the year, your tax residence position may have an impact on what you're taxable on, because you might not have just employment income or Irish source self-employed income, you might have foreign income. So depending on what your tax residence position, your ordinarily residence position and your domicile status is, then that determines what you're actually taxable on here in Ireland. So I've just set out there the tax residence rules. So it's based on physical presence. So if you're in Ireland for any part of a day, that's counted as 1 day for tax residence. So if you have 183 days or more in Ireland in the tax year, the calendar year, you're tax resident. Or another, then if you don't meet that rule, you look at the second one and you go, okay, if you have 280 days or more in Ireland in total in the current year and the preceding tax year, with at least 30 days in each year, you can be resident under that rule as well. So just to give an example, say you have arrived into Ireland on the 1st of August 2022, you're going to have less than 183 days in Ireland from 1 August to the 31st of December. And you're going to have less than 280 days between the 1st of January 2021, which is the prior year, and the 31st of December 2022. So that means you're not tax resident. However, even if you're not tax resident, you can elect to be tax resident, and you may think, why would I want to do that? So usually if you are tax resident, then you would be entitled to a full year's standard rate band, and also you'd be entitled to a full year's tax credits, even though you've only arrived halfway through the year and your income, only half of your income. So you're only taxable on your income from the date that you arrive into Ireland, your employment income up to the end, but you're entitled against that income to a whole year's standard rate band and your tax credits if you elect for residency. If you're not tax resident in a tax year, then you're not entitled to the full rate bands and credits, but you can get a proration based on your income taxable in Ireland over your worldwide income, but you'd need to apply for that. Ordinary residence, that just means that you become ordinarily resident once you've been tax resident under that 183 or 280 day rule for 3 consecutive tax years. And then in the 4th year, you also become ordinarily resident. It's the same when you're leaving. So say you've been here for 5 years and then you leave Ireland again. So you'll be ordinarily resident, but as soon as you've been non-tax resident for 3 consecutive tax years, then you become not ordinarily resident then in the 4th year, assuming that you remain non-resident. One point to note is for married individuals, if your partner is not tax resident in Ireland and you are usually treated as a single individual for tax purposes. So you would effectively get the single rate bands and single credits. However, if your spouse is living abroad and they have no income, then you can be taxed as a married one income. So you would get those elevated married standard rate bands and credits. With regards to domicile, this is a legal concept and it's acquired at birth, and it's generally the same as the domicile of your father. So I'm not originally from Ireland myself. My dad is actually from the UK. He was born in the UK, so I would be UK domiciled. So I'm not Irish domiciled. So what does all this mean? So if you're an Irish tax resident, but you're not originally from Ireland, your father wasn't Irish, you're not Irish domiciled. So in that case, then what you're taxable on here in Ireland is any Irish source income, foreign employment income to the extent that it relates to Irish work days, but there is that concession if you're working for a Ukrainian employer, but I'll come on to that. And then any other foreign income that you have, it is only taxable if you bring it into Ireland. So say, for example, you had foreign investment income. That would only be taxable if you brought that income into Ireland. This differs to somebody who is Irish tax resident and they're also Irish domiciled. If you're resident and domiciled, you're taxable on your worldwide income. Okay. So then a question I understand that comes up a lot is that, okay, is it worth me going to work and getting some social welfare benefits? How do I know that I'm going to be better off if I start working? So obviously with everyone's different personal circumstances, your net position can differ a lot. You might be having lots of different types of social welfare benefits, or depending on your personal circumstances, you might have different bands of credits that are assigned to you. So your net pay might be different. So I've just set out here some resources that you can use to kind of estimate that position. So the first one then is the social welfare benefit estimator. And what you do is when you click into that link, it takes you through to the social welfare website, and it asks you a few questions. So it gives about different types of social welfare benefits that you're claiming. So there could be job seekers allowance in there. And then it asks you what income that you would usually receive, how many days a week that you work, and then how many hours you work a week. And then you can do a calculation, and it does a very rough estimate of your position. So it's worth going into that and playing around with it and putting in your details, and it will kind of give you what your net pay position would be. Another way of doing it is you can compare the social welfare benefits that you're receiving versus your net pay. But again, it's just a rough estimate. In order to calculate what your net pay would be, there is a calculator which is based on the 2022 rates and bands. And if you click into this, you put in your personal details, whether you're married, single, your income, and it will give you an estimate of what you should be receiving net after taxes. So that's another good resource there. Generally, at the moment, with regards to the 2022 rate bands and credits, the tax credits will cover a certain amount of employment income. So if you're earning 17,000 euros or less, you won't pay any income tax because your tax credits of 1,700 personal tax credit and 1,700 PAYE tax credit as an employee would cover that level of income. So that would mean that you wouldn't pay any taxes. However, you may have to pay universal social charge if your income's over 13,000, and you may also have to pay PRSI depending on how much you earn each week. There are certain social welfare payments that are not subject to tax, such as child benefit, or there are certain ones that are. So in this link here, if you click into that, that gives a list of all the taxable social welfare benefits and all the non-taxable ones. And with regards to social welfare benefits, they're liable to income tax, but they're not liable to USC or PRSI. And finally, there are certain exemption limits for individuals who are 65 years or older, and that's set out in this link. Now, just in relation to this concession, so say you've come into Ireland but you're still working for a Ukrainian employer. So at the moment, there is a concession in place from the Irish revenue, but it applies solely to employment income paid to people who are employees are based in Ireland. And it basically states that Irish-based employees of a Ukrainian employer are not liable to income tax and USC on their Ukrainian employment income relating to Irish workdays. And also, the actual employer is not required to operate the PAYE system on that employment income. There are certain conditions that apply. So the employee, basically the conditions for it to apply are that the employee would have performed employment duties in Ukraine, but for the war there. And that's the reason why they've come here to Ireland and they're working in Ireland as an employee. And also you need to remain subject to Ukrainian income tax on your employment income. There's also a concession in relation to corporation tax for limited companies, and it states that the revenue will disregard the presence in Ireland for corporation tax purposes with regards to any company in Ukraine where the employee, the director, the service provider or the agent would have continued to be present in Ukraine but for the war there. So those concessions are currently still in place. And then just coming on to if you employ others, so you are the employer. So what do you need to do there? So if you employ others, then you do need to register as an employee, as an employer, using the revenue online system. So at the beginning of the presentation, I was saying about registering and the registration requirements. So in order to register as an employer, you can do this online. There's an e-registration facility. It's much cheaper and more efficient than submitting paper applications. But you need to be registered either for Ross or my account in order to use that. And then I've just set out the steps on how you do that, depending on whether you have Ross or my account. And then just finally, you might be wondering, you've been taken on by a company, and are you an employee, or like maybe you're self-employed and you're just invoicing the company, and you're like, am I an employee or am I self-employed? What is my status? So this is a very complex area. And so actually the revenue have this code of practice for determining an employment status. And if you click into that link on the slide, what it has a lot of pages, but there's a couple of pages that set out characteristics of if you are an employee, this is what it would look like. If you are self-employed, this is what it would look like. But the important point to note here is it is the employer's obligation to operate PAYE. So if they are taking on individuals and not operating PAYE, when in fact the individual, it looks like to revenue that they are actually employees, like there's set number of hours, they're directed what to do, they have to come and work in the office, they're telling them what to do, there's certain things that they look at. But basically, if the revenue were to find that PAYE were due, then that is an employer obligation rather than employee. So that's the main thing to note there. I know that was a lot of information, but if you have any questions, I don't know, I think we're going to cover them later. So store up the questions and you can ask me at the end.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Sarah. That was really comprehensive, and I believe you answered part of the questions that we already received.
Okay.
But we'll be back to the question and answer session shortly after the Mariana and Ruslan. Сара, дуже дякую. Це дуже комплексний огляд податкової системи. Тепер би хотілося переключитися на практичну сторону цього. І тому я передаю слово своєму комодератору Мар'яні та нашому гостю Руслану. Мар'яна, далі floor is yours. Я думаю, може ти захочеш додати ще щось від себе.
Так, дякую, Павло. І Сара, дуже докладна презентація. Зараз я хотіла б запитати, чи нас Руслан Мочарський чує?
Доброго вечора.
Руслан, дуже дякую, що приєдналися. Особисто я відчуваю себе привілеєваною, оскільки останній, хто брав у вас інтерв'ю, був найвідоміший ведучий в Ірландії Райан Турбеті. Також я би хотіла сказати дякую, що знайшли час, щоб приєднатися до нашого вебінару.
Нема за що. It's the pleasure.
Спасибі. Руслан, перше запитання. Я знаю вас як співвітчизника, власника успішної мережі кав'ярень у Дубліні, яка називається Art of Coffee, але перш за все як людину з добрим серцем. З самого початку конфлікту ви мобілізували всі сили навколо себе досить швидко, зрушили гори та досягли неймовірних результатів для українців, для нашого народу. Розкажіть, будь ласка, що надає вам щодня енергії та драйву?
Ну, я думаю, енергії та драйву на доброчинність, робити доброчинність, це надає насолода від того, що ти комусь допомагаєш. От. І це, напевно, якась така валюта, яка не має ціни взагалі в цьому світі, і не має співвідношення ні до долара, і, напевно, так само не оподатковується, якщо тема сьогодні про податки. От. Це просто неможливо описати, і це мене надихає. Я насолоджуюсь, маю час допомагати, буду допомагати.
Спасибі. Від себе, і це, напевне, навіть і не половина того, що ви зробили, 37 машин швидкої допомоги, 5 джипів, 300 тисяч євро медичного обладнання та сканерів, 25 вантажівок гуманітарної допомоги. І це все в досить такий короткий час.
Дивіться, це асоціація українців в Ірландії, це Аурі. Це не я один, це нас ціла команда. По-перше, було пару проєктів, паляницю, яку я започаткував. Так само наші лікарі, українці, які працюють тут в Ірландії вже довший час, вони майже всі консультанти, вони зібралися разом і відкрили fundraising кампейн тут так само. От. І це все було під парасолькою асоціації українців в Ірландії. Тобто це не один я, це ціла команда. Ціла команда однодумців, які просто хочуть допомогти.
Молодці, молодці. І нещодавно концерт, на якому я побувала, і Павло побував Thank You Island, концерт, який ви зробили, щоб сказати спасибі Ірландії за все, що Ірландія робить для наших людей. Це чудовий навіть не концерт, фестиваль. Дуже гарні відчуття.
Так. Знову ж таки, це також була наша команда. Микола Левченко, якщо, може, ви його знаєте, він дуже довго вже в цьому бізнесі тут в Ірландії, він привозився зірок. От, я перший раз в житті організовував такий концерт, допомагав йому. І знову ж таки, Аурі, команда Аурі.
Молодці.
Українців. Так. Ну, було гарно.
Молодці. Якщо перевести зараз більше до бізнесу і контексту taxation, які на податки, я, значить, знаю, що ви починали як kitchen porter в кафе Борделі, так?
Так.
Майже з нульовим англійським, і після короткого часу ви мали підвищення по роботі, вас підвищили до менеджеру бара, і одного разу у вас був вибір, чи продовжувати працювати на когось, чи стати самозайнятим, відкрити свою справу. І ви вибрали свою справу. Розкажіть, як то було? Що допомогло вам, по-перше, вибрати, піти по напрямку своєї справи? Що дало вам впевненості? І що ви думаєте про цей процес саме відкриття і оподаткування, і всіх тих таких моментів, які потрібно людині знати, які українці, які дивляться зараз цей вебінар, чи подивляться пізніше на Ютубі? Що саме ви можете порадити з свого боку?
Дивіться, взагалі-то можливо почати з того, що може є так, три типи людей, які просто люблять працювати на когось, є люди, які готові ризикувати і працювати самому на себе. Ну і є такі люди, які взагалі нічого не хочуть робити. От. Я так життя склалося, я взагалі все відносився до другого типу. Я і в Україні сам на себе працював колись. От, і мріяв тут в Ірландії попрацювати на себе. От, і випала така можливість відкрити першу маленьку кав'ярню на колесах. От, я, як сьогодні пам'ятаю, купив її за 47 тисяч євро. В той момент міг купити нового Мерседеса.
Так.
От, так. Починав зранку, закінчував пізно, але працював на себе, був собі сам босом. От. На рахунок оподаткування, взагалі моя думка така, що в Ірландії найпростіше, найкласніше оподаткування взагалі, яке може бути. Якщо чесно, я навіть не знаю, де податкова знаходиться в Ірландії. Повністю все онлайн, все заповнюється онлайн, все подаєш онлайн, все робиться повністю онлайн. На рахунок, я слухав про taxation і про self-employment. Я думаю, я можу ще додати, що не обов'язково відкривати limited компанію, щоб мати працівників. Я починав, я був sole trader. Крім self-employment, крім self-employment, якщо ти сам на себе працюєш, ти ще можеш відкрити такий, називається sole trader. Це коли ти сам на себе працюєш і ще маєш право нанімати працівників. От. Так що зверніть це увагу так само. От. Ну,
Досить
принципі...
цікаво. Досить цікаво, Руслане. І до речі, по цій темі я не знала навіть цього такого моменту. Я знаю, що люди цікавляться. То значить, якщо щоб відкрити свою справу, і коли ти наймаєш людей, тобі не потрібно починати одразу з limited company. Ти можеш...
Так. Але тоді ти відповідаєш своїм майном. Якщо відкриваєш limited company, тоді майно компанії. От різниця.
Так. А на якому етапі, Руслан, ви перейшли від цього формату?
Коли ми вже почали розвиватися, коли почали відкривати вже одну, другу, третю, четверту кав'ярню, тоді вже ми трошки якби росли, розвивалися і вже було варто відкрити limited компанію. Так само я маю ще бізнес-партнера Анатолій Кириченко, то нам вже в принципі потрібно було відкрити limited компанію, тому що якщо компанію відкриваєш, там далі ти маєш акції.
Так.
От, і 2 директора, чи 3 директора, чи 4, відповідно, розділяють між собою акції. Нам просто вже було необхідно відкрити limited компанію.
Окей, зрозуміло. І, до речі, напевне, для людей, які хочуть такий формат використати, що оподаткування саме досить таки просто, коли відкриваєш, починаєш як sole trader, так? І нанімаєш людей, якщо порівняти з... Окей.
Так, потім ще такий нюанс, хотів би додати на рахунок ПДВ. От, я точно, треба ви провірте мене, будь ласка, онлайн, але також потрібно зареєструватися на ПДВ, це називається VAT number, VAT number.
Так.
От, якщо ви плануєте вторговувати, мені здається, 75 тисяч або більше у рік, то вам обов'язково потрібно зареєструватися. От, якщо менше, то не потрібно. Відповідно, якщо ви зареєстровані, якщо ви продаєте свої товари або послуги, ви повинні клієнта так само оподатковувати, на інвойсі писати VAT. Якщо ви не зареєстровані, не обов'язково. Але це обов'язково для податкової, щоб ви мали на увазі зареєструватися на VAT.
Так, я згодна. У мене така сама інформація, Руслане, і теж досить до речі.
Це важливо, так.
Дуже дякую. Ще можу 1-2 запитання, тому що я обіцяла 10 хвилин, так, не хочу перевищувати. Значить, Руслан, я чула, що ви зараз працюєте над таким українським ресурсним центром на базі Паляниці, який буде мати школу українську, мовні курси для ірландців, де вони вивчати українську мову, мастер-класи. Розкажіть нам трошечки більше про цю ініціативу.
Дивіться, В Дубліні в даний момент, так як ми мали приватне приміщення, ми закрили вже, і паляниці вже поки що немає, але вона існує віртуально, я можу так сказати. От кожен день маю якісь запити по емейлу, кожен день чи колясочку для дитини везу, десь що має скоро народитися, чи що інше. А от в Арклові і в Віклові, знову ж таки, це Аурі, мої колеги, мої знайомі, вони там планують зробити і вже зробили на основі паляниці, вже не гуманітарні паляниці більш, але більш такі інформаційні, так само школи для діток наших українських. І також зробили курси для ірландців, курси української мови.
Супер. Дуже інноваційно. Якщо люди, які дивляться це, хотіли би трохи більше про це знати, як вони мають гугланути Аурі і знайти контакти? Чи...
У нас є веб-сайт ukrainians.ie.
Окей.
І там вся інформація повністю.
Окей. Дуже добре. І останнє запитання. Я знаю, що в Україні ви з Івано-Франківська, і перша ваша робота то була вчитель піаніно і акордіону, так?
Ні, тут в Ірландії просто говорить акордеон, а взагалі-то я аж тут дізнався, що акордеон – це баян,
так.
А піано-акордеон – це і акордеон.
Так.
Я викладач по класу акордеона, тобто піано-акордеон.
Окей, добре.
Акордеон тут маю, деколи по святам граю, але тільки для себе і для сім'ї, і для друзів.
Окей, зрозуміло. Окей, дуже дякую, Руслан. Я думаю, що у нас буде ще запитання 2 від нашої аудиторії, але я передаю Павло. Дуже спасибі вам.
Слава Україні!
Слава Україні!
Героям
слава!
Дякую, Руслане, дякую, Мар'яна. Це насправді дуже така надихаюча історія і мотивуюча. Ми переходимо до питань. Якщо Руслан, Мар'яна, ви ще будете з нами, ви так само долучайтесь до відповідів на запитання. Учасники, ставте ваші питання у чаті, ми будемо їх зачитувати, так само перекладати. Sarah, are you with us? Can you still hear us?
I can.
Yeah, perfectly. We are moving to our mixed format with the questions. I believe our interpreter Andriy already sent you the questions. I would read them in Ukrainian, but copy in, but also repeat for you in English as well. Okay.
I have them here.
Yeah. Okay. So let me start with the original language, and then probably I'll sum it up with you once again, and we move to your answers. Шановні учасники, ще раз нагадаю, що у нас буде вестись синхронний переклад, тому ви можете вибрати переклад і поставити своє запитання. Тож, перше запитання, яке ми побачили, для самозанятых мам-одиночек, содержащих детей самих, как насчитываются налоги, есть ли скидки на уплату или отсрочки от первой даты оформления ФОП? So for self-employed single mothers who support their children and living alone, how exactly is tax calculated? Is there a discount to standard rate or tax credit applied from the first date of registration? As a self-employed, as I understand, being self-employed, it's more like being sole trader.
Yeah. So self-employed is like a sole trader. So unlike an employee, you're not going to have a monthly deduction. You will register for income tax, and you'll have to file a yearly tax return by the 31st of October following the tax year. And in that tax return, you would set out your income less your expenses, and then you would say in your tax return that you were single, and it would apply then the single standard rate band and your single tax credits that apply to you. There might be other tax credits that apply, so it's worth having a look at the tax credits in that link that I had in my presentation, just to see, are there any other tax credits that you could be entitled to? And if you are, you can go onto your Ross or your My account and you can make an application for those tax credits. The revenue might ask you for some extra information or to fill out a form or something. But once you have those tax credits, then that you could apply those in your tax return, or you could just say in your tax return that you think that you're entitled to these tax credits, and then before they issue out an assessment, they might ask you for some extra information if they require it in relation to the tax credits. So I hope that sort of answers the question. And then the second question, then, do you want to?
Let me read it first in Ukrainian and then to English to you. So, я маю дитину 10 років, розведена, живу сама в Ірландії, читала інформацію про те, як зареєструватися як соло-трейдер. Приватний підприємець та соціальні виплати transitional payments зразу змінюються. Чи це так, чи є інша грошова підтримка? So I believe it's little similar to what you already said, maybe some peculiarities you would like to highlight. So I have a child 10 years old, divorced, living in Ireland on my own. I found the following for if I register as solo trader, the social payments is being deducted straight away. Is that correct? Is there any other sort of money, fiscal support to receive?
So again, as a sole trader, you'd be taxable then based on when you file your tax return. So by the 31st of October in the following year. So that would be when you would need to pay any balance of taxes due. As to with regards to any kind of support, again, check those tax credits to see are there any tax credits that you would be entitled to, and also have a look at the social welfare website to see if there's any other support. I don't know much about social welfare benefits, but they might be worth looking into things like child benefit and things like that. That could offer some support.
Yep, thank you. And we would leave the link to the information about social support. Ми залишимо вам після вебінару так само посилання на додаткову інформацію про social support. Okay, moving on to the next question. Я працювала в Ірландії 6 місяців, перебуваючи на тимчасовому захисті. Зараз повертаюсь назад до України і хочу дізнатися, чи є можливість отримати податки назад, поки я в зв'язку з поверненням з Ірландії. Якщо так, яка процедура? So I worked for 6 months in Ireland while on temporary protection. Now I'm moving back to Ukraine and I want to know if there is a possibility for me to receive the tax return or tax being paid here in Ireland back. If yes, what's the procedure?
Yes, if you've just worked 6 months in Ireland, it will depend on the circumstances, but if you file a tax return or contact revenue, say you've left Ireland, you can get your taxes assessed, and it could be that there could be some taxes back. I can't say definitely, but you should definitely make an assessment with the revenue to see if there is any due back on the basis that you just worked in Ireland for 6 months.
So just to clarify, in this case, so there's kind of no need to wait for a regular tax return period. So
yes, I presume it's working as an employee for 6 months. If it was an individual who had worked self-employed for 6 months, then you'd need to file a tax return and see. But I think this probably relates to an employee. That's the way I'm reading it.
Okay. We have a few more questions from, if you have some time, Sarah, to follow up, which we received from the registered participants. Шановні учасники, у нас є ще питання, які ставились нам під час реєстрації вами. Якщо ви хочете ще щось питати, поки ми відповідаємо на питання, які отримали в реєстраційній формі, так само, будь ласка, пишіть або у чаті, або у Q&A, ми будемо раді відповісти. Є ще одне питання, але давайте ми переключимось на ще одне з реєстраційної форми і будемо міксувати. Тоді, живу в Ірландії по тимчасовому прихистку, діти ходять в школу, я відмовилась від фінансової підтримки, тому що працюю віддалено на українську компанію. Які мої дії по сплаті податків за проживання в Ірландії? Дякую. Sarah, I believe you covered this a little bit. So the question is, I live in Ireland under temporary protection. Children are going to school. I have refused receiving financial support from Ireland because I'm working on the Ukrainian company remotely. What are my actions for paying taxes in Ireland? Thank you.
Okay, so they're working for a Ukrainian.
Yeah, for
Employer.
Ukrainian company, Ukrainian employer, so it's kind of remote.
Okay. So if you're working for an Ukrainian employer, there is that revenue concession. And if you meet those conditions, that the reason why, you know, you've moved here and you're working as an employee in Ireland is because of, you've moved here because of the war. So it could be that there is a concession there, and the taxes could be due back.
Okay, so that's the kind of exemption scheme which you described on your website.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. The next question from chat. Я приїхав до Ірландії з дружиною та дитиною 4 квітня, вже 5 травня поїхав працювати в море. Працюю на морі під ліберійським флагом, компанія не ірландська, заробітну платю отримую в ірландському банку, повертаюсь до своєї родини в Ірландію 2 жовтня, які податки я маю заплатити. Жінка не працює, дитина ходить до ірландської школи. I believe we have some kind of cross-border taxation question. Let me follow up this with you. So I came to Ireland with my wife and our child on 4th of April, left to work on 5th of May, working on ship. As I understand, the man is a sailor or working as a crew member. I'm working on the vessel under Liberian flag. The company is not Irish. I receive monthly salary in an Irish bank, and I'm coming back to my family in Ireland on October 2nd.
Okay.
So there's
that sounds a very specialist question. That's a very good question. I might need to come back to you on that one because it's in relation to a vessel. When you said cross-border, I thought maybe they're going up to Northern Ireland and working for an employer up there, but on a vessel, yeah, that might be something. I need to look into that one.
Yep, perfect. If then you can send them some links or something.
Sure.
Just let us know that we help. So, Сара надійшла нам після цього посилання, якщо якась буде релевантна інформація, бо дуже специфічне конкретне питання. Okay, I suggest us taking a few more questions and not keeping you too long, given the timing. I'll just checking that there are some questions you either answered or they repeat the same questions. Again, one more question about sailor, one more question about tax return. Okay, the question, I believe there is next questions about the child and social payments. The next question, it's related about what are the taxation in case of the working not full-time. Питання стосовно оподаткування у разі роботи неповний день. I believe you covered this a bit, maybe some additional
information. If you're working part-time, then you're still entitled to your standard rate band and your tax credits for the year. So it would just be a case of applying those same bands and credits. So you apply for your tax credit certificate and your income is subject to those tax bands and credits. So if you're resident and single, it's currently 36,800 euros is taxable at 20%. And then you've got your PAYE and your personal tax credits. So it doesn't matter that you're part-time worker, the same credits and bands apply to you.
Okay, perfect. And шановні учасники, я думаю, ми беремо ще останнє питання. Якщо у вас є ще щось запитати, питайте. So I see one more question. What taxes should I pay and when my wife is not? We already had this one. the one more, which is not the before, but very comprehensive one. I read it in Ukrainian first. Питання: всі види податків в Ірландії також при повній робочій зайнятості і частковій. So the question is, what are the types of taxation in Ireland depending on full-time and part-time work? Let me do it kind of more generic way, because I understand that there could be some questions coming like a lot from taxes. Maybe you could, like, if you could refer to some source among those you already said, or some additional source of information. If first some people, our audience have some questions about taxation in future. Yeah, what where to refer
versus full-time.
Yeah, where to go first to check it out, your position.
Okay, so everyone's going to receive the presentation slides, I understand. So you'll need to refer to, there's a link for the tax rate bands and credits that apply to you. So regardless of whether you're a full-time worker or a part-time worker, you would go into there and just check what other person, it's got personal circumstances, and you look down and see which one applies to you. Is it single? Is it married, 2 incomes? Is it married, 1 income? And just look for the ones that apply to you. And there's no difference regarding full-time or part-time workers.
Okay, perfect. If we may, like one last more, and we
I'm in demand.
Yeah,
on the hot seat here.
Yeah, once again, it's I believe it's partially taxation, partially immigration question. Comment, we have it from Julia. Julia says, really thanks for all. Only one question. Now we will start new business in Ireland. Can we stay here with temporary protection? When protection is gone, can we work online? If business model can work online from different country, or also from Ukraine, for example, on the market in Ireland, pay taxes here, etc. So I believe we can separate it. So if there is migrational issue, whether it's possible to stay in Ireland, and I believe we would address it separately. But in terms of doing business remotely online, being not in Ireland, but paying taxes here, whether it's possible, I'll give you a minute and translate it in Ukrainian. У нас є ще одне запитання. Зараз ми працюємо, відкриваємо бізнес в Ірландії. Чи можна залишитись тут після того, як закінчаться заходи тимчасового захисту? Чи буде можливість працювати онлайн, наприклад, якщо бізнес-модель дозволяє працювати онлайн з іншої країни, в тому числі з України, на ірландському ринку, платити податки тут і так далі? Ми зазначили, що тут є частина, яка пов'язана з міграційними питаннями. Я думаю, ми спробуємо це залишити для іншого вебінару і спитатися у експерта з міграції. Але в той же час я попросив Сару відповісти нам, можливо, про аспект онлайн-бізнесу і податкування.
So it's an Irish business that's been set up, but they're working remotely. So I take it they're the business owners as opposed to employees. So I suppose if you go back to normal principles, I mean, if it's a company, it's a limited company. It depends whether there is corporation tax to pay. That's not my area of expertise. I'm more kind of on the employee side. But from a personal taxation perspective, so this is in relation to any income that you receive out of the company yourself, the principles are based on your residence and your domicile. So if you're non-resident and non-domiciled, then you're taxable on your Irish source income. There could be possible treaty relief. It can get complicated with regards to cross-border. You'd need to look at the treaty between Ireland and the country that that you're remotely working in to see if there's any treaty relief in relation to it. Otherwise than that, yeah, as regards the limited company information, my expertise on that area is limited. I'm kind of more on the personal taxation side, but I'm sure we could look into it.
Okay, got you. Anyways, it's helpful to understand general framework. Отож, шановні учасники, враховуючи обмеження наших спікерів по часу, ми будемо завершувати, але розуміючи, що тема податків, вона складна та комплексна, як і з деякими іншими вебінарами, ми будемо робити ще додаткові вебінари, і ті питання, які ми не змогли покрити сьогодні, враховуючи те, що вона не відповідала або темі, або не зовсім в рамках експертизи спікерів, ми будемо покривати ще додатково, тому ми будемо рухатись до завершення. Мар'яна, Руслане, може у вас є ще якісь фінальні додаткові коментарі перед тим, як ми будемо завершувати?
З мого боку, дякую всім. Досить такий інформативний вебінар у нас получився. Так що just want to say, Sarah, thank you for answering so many questions. We're quite popular with the taxation subject. I hope that there will be questions to Ruslan, but Sarah taken all of them. Quite a great topic. So no, nothing from my side. Ruslan, maybe you've got some final word to say to people that will watch it. Ruslan, you're on mute. If you're trying to say anything.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, whoever is planning to open the business in Ireland, just go ahead. Don't be afraid. Try it, risk it. This is the good country to try, and everything will be fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll probably wrap up on both languages for everyone. Many thanks to Sarah and Ruslan for being with us. You've been very helpful during this webinar and very informative, and both your answers are comprehensive and very motivating for our audience. We're happy to have you now and continue with our webinar series on those important topics. Ми дякуємо нашим спікерам Сарі Обойл та Руслану Мочарському за те, що вони були з нами. Їх приклади та розповіді дуже комплексні, цікаві та надихаючі. Дякую, що ви були з нами. Нагадуємо, що цей вебінар проводився за підтримки Європейського Союзу, DLA Piper, Irish Refugee Council та Також Labs. Долучайтесь до наших наступних вебінарів. Ми залишимо обов'язково посилання на відео і на всі інші посилання, ресурси, які зазначали нам спікери під час цього вебінару. Дякуємо всім, що ви були з нами. Дякуємо всім українцям, що ви підтримуєте один одного і підтримуєте Україну разом до перемоги. Thank you all for being with us and together we win. Have a good evening to everyone.